Hey everybody, this is Doug with Artfully Rogue. I'm going to show you a product called ThermaShield Heat Protection Gel. Now, I'm going to stay right off the bat, I am not being sponsored by this company, but I will tell you my brother works for this company, and so he sends me products periodically to check out. Now, I'm using this specifically while I'm TIG welding stainless steel. Also a disclaimer, I am probably not the best authority on TIG welding stainless. I would say I've been doing it now for maybe about a year and a half, and while I feel I can run a bead relatively nice, I still have issues. And one of the issues that I have is if I go too long with a particular weld, the heat will start to move across the stainless and begin to warp that stainless. It's what you would expect if you put a blowtorch on a piece of steel and it just starts to warp. What I found out though is this product reduces that. And so I have less of a roller coaster effect on the stainless that I'm working with, and it controls that heat. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So for me, this is a typical setup. I'm using 16 gauge steel for my water basins, and what I typically do is I'll tack weld each corner so that it holds it in place, and then I come back and I'm going to use my filler rod, or I'll roll over this edge. Now, because you don't want to overheat the metal, because you don't want it to warp, is you do small sections and you bounce around. Now, I left this here so you can see. Right now, that sheet metal is pretty much flat, it's nice, and that's the way I would like it to stay. But what I'm going to show you is, I'm going to show the welds doing it in small sections, and then I'm going to come back and do a longer weld, and you're going to see how that heat affects the sheet metal. For the first example, I'm using what I call the rollover method. It's when you lay a piece of sheet metal on top of another piece and you basically create the puddle and pull it down almost like you're using a paintbrush, pulling paint across a piece of paper. It creates a small puddle that you can actually pull down over the second sheet. It's a nice clean way of doing your TIG welding if you have the material to do it. So as you can see, doing it in small increments actually isn't too bad. Problem is, you need to wait so that the steel has a chance to kind of cool down before you come back and you start to fill in these areas. Now, what that's going to do is that's going to add to the length of time it takes you to do this project. So when you come back and actually you start to fill this in, you're going to continue to heat this up. In the second example, I'm using filler rod, and this is kind of more the standard technique of welding you're seeing. I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not a specialist in TIG welding. I do not lay dimes like some welders refer to a nice looking weld. My welds look more like loose change thrown on the floor. This method creates more heat because the weld is much longer. Okay, temperature is 372 degrees. Okay, so now I'm going to use the ThermaShield for the remaining part of this weld. Now, this isn't actually doing too bad. It is managing to keep nice and flat, and the heat transfer isn't going back too far. But I'm going to create a barrier right now, and then I'm just going to weld this entire thing straight. I'm going to use the same filler rod method to continue this example. This time using the ThermaShield to block the heat from going beyond that line I created with the ThermaShield. I'll put the temperature sensor on that area and see what our temps are above and below the ThermaShield. Below the ThermaShield is 267 degrees, and above the ThermaShield is 102 degrees. You can see that ThermaShield cuts the temperature in about half. Okay, so my test piece didn't warp as much as I had expected it to warp. Now, that's not the case when I actually do projects. I'm working on a fire feature right now, and on one side of the fire feature, before I started using the ThermaShield, it did give me a little bit of a roller coaster. But because of this particular project, that's not really going to matter because of the way it's going to be finished. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so this might be a little hard to see, but right in here there's a little bit of a belly, and then it comes up to a little bit of a bump, and then goes into a belly, and then into a bump.
So I have a little bit of a roller coaster going on right here. Now this is before I actually used the ThermaShield. Once I got about midway, I realized that this was starting to do a little bit of a roller coaster. So I started using a spray bottle with some wet rags over here. But as you can see, I still had to kind of chase that heat. There was a bit of a bump here and a bit of a belly here as well. So over here, this area really didn't have any protection whatsoever. Then I got to here and I started using a spray water bottle and some wet rags. And as you can see, I still have a bit of a bump here, a little bit of a belly here. And then I moved to the ThermaShield. When you apply the ThermaShield, it comes out as a gel as you spray it, roughly about a ½ inch to an inch away from the area where you're going to be welding. As you move along, it will actually absorb the heat as you go, and it will kind of evaporate and become more congealed, kind of like jelly left out on the table to dry. I'm using the filler rod method here on this particular project, and what I'm going to do is create roughly a 3 to 4 inch weld, which builds up a lot of heat as you go down that weld line. Here's the difference. I'm going to spray some water on the weld side, sizzling hot. And no sizzle above the ThermaShield. ThermaShield has saved me a couple times when I've inadvertently laid my arm or my hand where I just welded.
All right, so there you go. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. It is greatly appreciated. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do so now. If you'd like to leave comments, go ahead and leave those down below. And all of the information that you might need to get the ThermaShield is going to be down in my description. And I'll give you the parts number and some contact information where you can go ahead and purchase this yourself. Now, I don't get any kickback on this, so you do what you want to do. I'm trying to help my brother get sales, so go check it out. It's pretty cool. I like it. See you in the next video.